Hi, everybody. I'm Nicole Mahalski, and I want to welcome you to the Your Best Life Yet Summit. In the summit, we're going to look at all areas of your life, from personal, career, and business to home and even relationships. Our experts are going to share with you their insights and strategies so that you can live your best life yet, allowing you to create more joy, time, money, and freedom in your life. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest speaker. A powerful keynote speaker, Lisa McLeod has rocked the house for giants like Rush, as well as franchises, nonprofits, and associations around the world. She has delivered programs in over 25 countries. She is the best-selling author, the sales leadership expert at Forbes.com, and has been featured in Fortune, the Wall Street Journal, and has even appeared on NBC Nightly News, as well as the Today Show. Her programs are consistently the highest-rated programs of major conferences. She has delivered keynotes to groups of well over 10,000 people. Her presentations center on how organizations and leaders can really drive better results by instilling a greater sense of purpose. A greater sense of purpose enables people to close more business, become more effective leaders, and even lead more happier lives. So welcome, Lisa. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Oh, thanks. I'm delighted to be here. Greetings from my home office outside of Atlanta.
So I've asked Lisa here today because her focus on finding a noble purpose really hit home for me. And I also love how she discusses how trying to be perfect can really rob ourselves of happiness in our life. And I know myself, as many of you guys can relate, that sometimes we really let that fear of being perfect really just rob ourselves from going after the things that we're wanting to achieve in our life. So I wanted to start out, Lisa, can you just share with us a little bit of your story? What's some of the key experiences that you've had that have really allowed you to make shifts and achieve the success that you have in your life?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And, you know, this idea of purpose and trying to be perfect, they're very connected. For me, when I grew up, I had what I called the checklist life. And like a lot of people, you know, you have this kind of script for your life, and you're going to grow up, you're going to get good grades, you're going to go to college, you're going to get grades so you can get a job, so then you're going to work hard so you can get a better job, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, and it's this checklist of things. And I guess I just kind of always assumed that once I got the checklist done, that I would be happy. You know, and like a lot of people, I grew up in a family that experienced a lot of moments of unhappiness and of, you know, dysfunction. And so there was this feeling that if I could do it right, if I could get the right job and the right house and look the right way and act the right way, that somehow happiness was just going to descend upon me. And I did all those things and did them really well. But there was this sense that this thing that I was waiting for didn't really happen. And so for me, the first crisis that I had, well, I'd had a couple crises. I had actually lost a sibling in childhood, and that will give you great pause when one of your siblings, a young sibling, passed away. Then you realize, oh my, this thing called life is not a guarantee. And then when I was in my late 20s and I was pregnant with my first child, and I had the house, I had the job, I had the husband, and I'm pregnant, I'm living the dream here. And my mother passed away. And it really gave me pause to really think about what I wanted for myself. And one of the things that came out of that was, with no writing experience at all, I decided to write a book, and that ended up being the book called Forget Perfect. And I can see now, that was 20 years ago, but I can see now that back then I was searching for this sense of greater purpose, and I couldn't find it until I let go of these very strict parameters that I had created with a lot of help from society, but self-created what I was supposed to be. So for me, that was the start of a journey towards something more meaningful.
And I think a lot of our audience can relate to that as well. We kind of grow up with this idea of what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to fit into society, but there's something inside of us that it just kind of never goes away, that we're supposed to be doing something else, or maybe there's something more out there for us. But we just, because society sets those standards, we just kind of shrink back and just let it go and keep living that life that we think that we're supposed to live.
Yeah, and it may be that you are leading the life that you're supposed to live. Because one of the things that I really thought about at that time, and I'll take you a little bit on the journey since, but I thought, gosh, I have a satisfying career. At the time, I was running my own small training company by then. I had a great career. By the time I wrote the book, I was in my early 30s. I really loved being a mother. And so it wasn't that I didn't like the things I was doing, but what I wanted to do was to make them more meaningful. And so the subtitle of that book, it's funny you mentioned joy. It was about finding more joy and happiness in the life you've already got. Because you see, this is a big mistake that we human beings consistently make. And I'm going to get to the business piece of this in a second, but our personal and our business are completely reflective of the story that's going on in our head. Because you really don't have two lives, business and personal. You just have one life. And you're right here, it's kind of at the center of it. And so what I came to realize was, and I see this mistake that humans make, including myself, is that we miss the beauty and the joy of what we're already doing. As you see, human beings are really unique in that we have this fundamental need. We want connection and we want meaning. And that transcends age, race, sex, culture. We want to know we make a difference. But what happens, because we have this set of parameters, and it may be that being a parent is what society conscripted you to do, and it may be that that is your greatest purpose on earth. So that may be the right role for you. But we have this vision of how it's supposed to look when we're doing it that keeps us from experiencing the way it can feel. And the same thing happens in business. We get so focused on how things look and the numbers that we miss the undercurrent, which is how does everything feel? And so that ended up being a lot of my life's work, was around helping people bring forth this sense of meaning and purpose in whatever they were doing.
And that's a great thing to live by, I think. And I agree, a lot of us, we have this idea of how it's supposed to go. And so when it doesn't, then that really kind of takes us out, and we're not seeing the joy that we could be having, just enjoying everything that's going on right now and just being happy with it.
Well, and it's interesting because for me, I spent a lot of my early years of my career, I was also a young mother. And so I really saw the parallels in what I was doing in leadership development with companies and what I was doing with my children, that humans are humans, no matter where you go. And as the leader, one of the things, whether you're the leader of a family, whether you're the leader of a business, whatever it may be, as the leader, part of your job is to set the emotional tone. And this is something that people don't get taught very often. It's often very underappreciated in home life and in work life, but it really matters. And the way that you set the emotional tone is the leader tells the group why what they're doing matters. The leader tells the group, here's what we're about. The leader creates the ethos. Now you do it in collaboration with your team, but this is the thing that will put a family or an organization off the rails. Without someone being really intentional about creating the culture and the emotional tone and telling people why we're here, that's when it'll go off the rails. It'll just be this perfunctory rinse and repeat exercise that no one is emotionally engaged in.
I love that you bring up emotions, because I think a lot of times, especially in business, we're taught that you can't be emotional in business, that you're supposed to just follow the guidelines. And that really doesn't work, because I believe that it's your emotion that connects you to your purpose, which allows you to run your business in a really heartfelt way that your consumers or clients can really be attracted to. And you're able to build closer relationships when you do that. And as well
absolutely.
At home.
Well, it's really funny because I had this training company for years, and now I do more work as a speaker and I'm an executive advisor. And so one of the things, just to be quite candid, I work with a lot of senior executives, most of whom are male. And so one of the things we always put on the table in the beginning is, the way I ask the question is I say, what do you want? What kind of response do you want the market to have? And people always say, we want our customers to love us. We want the market to love our stock. And then I'll say, well, what is one of the most valuable things, important things an employee can tell you on an employee survey or Glassdoor? And they'll say, we want our employees to love working here. So every executive on the planet will tell you, we want the market to love our stock. We want the customers to love doing business with us. We want our employees to love working here. And so then I usually say, well, you're going to have to get emotional, because the idea that you can generate all this goodwill and all this enthusiasm and somehow not be emotional is the stupidest thing that was ever taught in business school. It is completely antithetical to running a great business. Even on a balance sheet, they put a value on goodwill, which is nothing but emotion. And so what happens is, like we've seen recently, where CEOs have gotten in all kinds of trouble. We saw the Google memo where the guy talked about, women are too emotional for business. And it's hilarious, because I think, how many people is that guy going to get to sign up to work with him after this? Male or female? No one. But the idea is, if you want to create this wellspring of enthusiasm and engagement and passion, it's emotional. That's what it is. Numbers never do that for people.
No, and it's so true. Like, I just think of all the businesses or people out there that I've actually done business with. It's those people that do let their emotions show through, that really attracts you back to them, and that keeps you going back to do business with them, and that creates that goodwill. So it's so nice to see that it's finally being talked about in the business world as well, that it's okay to be emotional, and you can use that to really connect with your consumers and your clients and your audience that way.
Yeah. And if you don't understand, so like an example of a product that people are emotional about is an iPhone. I mean, it's a little, let's be honest, it's a little less differentiated now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when it was the only game in town. But you have to, the people who developed this and who market this have to understand the human experience. It's not just all tech. It's the way the human interacts with the tech. And I do a lot of work now with tech companies. One of the more popular books I've written is called Leading with Nobel Purpose. And it's about the idea that your business has to be for something. That's what gets people out of bed. That's what gives parents the energy to wake up at 2 a.m. for the 3rd time in a row, because they're doing it for something. And so in a business, it's the same thing. And who you have to be for is the customers. And it can't just be, one of the things we know is, you talk about this thing called purpose, which is something that spiritual leaders have been talking about since the dawn of time. But we now have hard evidence that businesses that have what I call a noble purpose, which is they are absolutely clear about how they improve the lives of their customers, businesses with a noble purpose outperform the market by over 350%. And the data could not be more clear. Employees who have a sense of purpose outperform their peers. Salespeople who sell with noble purpose outsell target-focused salespeople. And the reason that this matters is, you think about people like your audience who are coming to you for this holistic sort of life congruent advice. I want to be really clear here. This thing called purpose, this idea of dialing into something bigger than yourself, is rooted in some spiritual truths. And we now have hard evidence that it is extremely good for business. So we don't have to create a false dichotomy anymore about making money and making a difference. Those two things are actually aligned.
You could bring up a great example. Apple was absolutely amazing at building a culture and really portraying a lifestyle for the consumer about the Apple products. And those people that love Apple, I know that they will line up for a day or two before the new product comes out, just so that they could be the first one to get that new iPhone or the new iPad or whatever Apple has to offer, because they've made that connection with their audience. The consumer knows what Apple's purpose is, and they believe in that, and they support that.
And the products, it's not just a marketing spin. The products deliver for the most part on that. We had a client in the software business, and it's public information because they gave me permission to put it in the last book. And it's a software developer called Blackbaud, and they do software. They're a for-profit company, publicly traded company, and they do software for nonprofits. And one of the things that happened with them when we started working with them and we got really clear on their purpose, which was to have a dramatic impact on these clients and their ability to fundraise and the good that they did. And they're about doing more good in the world. Again, this is a for-profit, publicly traded company. But when they brought that purpose to life, what happened was they started to have some software breakthroughs. So if you just go to all the developers, the engineers, and the coders, and you say, develop something good, it's just going to be average at best. But if you say, here are the people that you are serving, how can we make their lives better? The output that you get is going to be so much better. You know, there's a very famous story. Alexander Graham Bell actually invented the telephone because his wife was deaf. Some of the greatest breakthroughs we've had, she was deaf, and he was playing around with tones to try and figure out what she could hear. And that's how he actually invented the telephone. And the reason that matters is I would encourage everyone listening, whether you are operating your own business, whether you run a team, whether you're a CEO, really think about, you know, what's the true and noble purpose of your organization? How do you serve your clients? And there's nothing wrong with making money on it. Apple's made a ton of money on it. But once you get everyone in your organization lined up around that, you do have better product development breakthroughs. You do have better marketing. You eliminate silos in your organization. So all these things that management consultants have been talking about for a long time, the answer to those problems is actually rooted in your ability to articulate a purpose bigger than just making money.
I agree. And I think that's a great way for the employees to connect as well and really feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves and want to really apply themselves to their work and make a difference because they have that purpose. They know what the company stands for and what they're doing there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, my first experience with this, with really seeing how powerful a purpose was and how it could affect your daily decision making, was when I was a young mother. My daughter now is 25 years old and she has a master's in organizational psychology and she's a project manager in our business. But flashback 24 and a half years ago, and I was sitting there holding her, and it was one of those late night, you know, where you're the new mother and the baby's up at night and you're just bleary-eyed. And I had the television on. This is before, you know, TiVo, and you just sort of turned on whatever was on there. TiVo hadn't been invented, much less, you know, DVRs and everything else. And there was this movie about Nixon, about Richard Nixon. And there was this moment when he was like in the Oval Office. I don't even remember what movie it was, but it was one of those Nixon movies. And he's like all dark and sweaty, you know, being very Nixon paranoid-ish. He's like, oh. And he flashes back to this incident with his mother. And it's like in the Depression, she's really poor. She's like cranking through laundry on one of those old things, you know, knuckles all showing, dirt poor, all the kids are around. And she says something to him like, Richard, you just could never trust people or something, you know, and she's just this poor woman trying to, you know, survive. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that poor thing. She has no idea. She's talking to Nixon. She's talking to Nixon. This woman has no idea. And I'm holding this baby, and I just thought, gosh, I guess the president's mother never knows that she's talking to the future president. She never knows. And then I thought, gosh, I wonder, someone right now is holding the future president and doesn't know it. And then I looked down and went, oh my God, it might be me. And then I thought, well, if you knew that you were raising the future president, how would you act? And it's a really important paradigm shift, because it doesn't mean that you're grooming your child, like fueling this ambition for them to be president. What it means is you've assumed they're already going to be, and you are instilling the values and the decision-making that you think the president needs. When she has her finger on the button, you're not there. And so there were lots of nights, you know, as a working parent, when I would come home and I would be tired. There were lots of times when there were difficult decisions to make, and I would think, okay, you're raising the future president. What does the future president need to know about what's important in this moment? And you make these decisions very differently, because it becomes not just about their behavior in the moment, but about what they're thinking. And so I use as an example, for me, 25 years ago, that was my first experience about how clarity of purpose could drive daily decision making. Flash forward now, I do this with companies, and we help them establish their own noble purpose for their company. And it could be like, we had one company, it says, we make transportation safer, faster, and more reliable. That was their noble purpose. So every decision is made through the lens of, how is this going to affect transportation? Is it going to be safer, faster, more reliable? And you can do that with anything. You can do that with any company. You can do that with parenting, obviously. But that lens is more than just something you aspire to. That's when you show up doing that every day, your work takes on a completely different significance.
And that's a great way of looking at noble purpose and making sure that you are making those decisions based on what you believe in and what you're trying to achieve. I think that's a great lead into the next question that I have. You know, a lot of people and businesses are still focused on just making money. So, can you explain to us why focusing on improving your customers' lives can be more profitable than just focusing on making money?
Well, it is interesting because if you ask people what's the purpose of a business, a lot of people will say to make money. And what I tell leaders is, if you ask your team what's the purpose of our business and they all say to make money, you have set yourself up for mediocrity. The very famous Peter Drucker expression, he says, profit is not the purpose of a business, it is the test of its validity. So we know now that purpose-driven companies make more money over the long term. So I'll give you a quick example of why. Imagine you have two teams, and one team is told the purpose of this business is to make money, and the other team is told the purpose of our business is to, I'll go back to my transportation, make transportation safer, faster, more reliable. Both of those teams are competing against each other. Which team is going to develop better products? Which team is going to have more compelling marketing? The team that says, hey, we're here to make money, or the team that says, we're here to make transportation safer, faster, more reliable? Which team is going to be more assertive in sales? This is one of the kickers. Our research revealed that salespeople who were driven by a sense of purpose actually outsold the quota-driven salespeople, because the salespeople driven by the true desire, the noble desire to improve their customers' lives, they go the extra mile. They ask better questions. They tell a better story about their products. And so it's really interesting because people now, purpose has become popular. You know, I wrote my first book about purpose was Selling with Noble Purpose, and I wrote it about 5 years ago. And purpose, people weren't talking about it. Now there's growing ranks of people talking about purpose. But one of the mistakes companies make is they think they can just slap this thing called purpose, like we make a difference, over everything. And it's a marketing message, but customers see through that. The truly purpose-driven companies, one of the key differences is they bring the customer into the front and center of their organization. So if they're making an operational decision, the purely revenue-driven company will say, how is this going to affect profits? The purpose-driven company will say, how is this going to affect customers? And so we're in a situation now where we have, unfortunately, quarterly capitalism, which is the CEO and everybody's just so in tune with trying to hit the quarterly number, and everybody's got bonuses on that they don't make decisions for the long term. But we've had a couple of clients that were publicly traded companies be very successful. The client I mentioned to you, Blackbaud, doubled their stock price in a year and a half because they focused on purpose. So it takes a lot of discipline, of leadership, to really keep your company focused on your purpose. And an important thing to note is it's not just about being customer centric. It's about being clear on the impact that you want to have on customers. So it's very proactive. It's not reactive.
I think those are great examples. I know from just looking at it from a consumer standpoint, I know lots of times we can see these companies kind of come onto the scene and see great success. And the first thing we think is like, oh, they're doing a great job and making lots of money. But what we don't see is like a year or two down the road, they're starting to struggle because that's all they were focused on, was making that money. But the companies that come on the scene and really know their purpose and work towards that, it might take them a little bit longer to see the success. But again, like you said, they're able to maintain that success over the long run. And I think that's far more important for a business to do than just, getting out there and making a lot of money right off the bat and really not having that sense of purpose behind their product or their service.
Well, we've seen what happens when companies have a purpose and they lose it. One of the examples that I use in leading with Nobel Purpose is Monster.com. Monster.com in the early 2000s was one of the top 20 performing stocks. It was one of the top 10 most visited websites in the world. They were the darling of the industry. And their founder, Jeff Taylor, was driven. He believed that you deserved a better job. And he wanted to use the power of the internet to help people find work that they loved. And they were on fire. But then what happened was a new set of leaders took over and it became all about the money. And guess what? They lost their competitive advantage. Product development slowed. People weren't as engaged. And they ended up becoming irrelevant. And so the idea, even if you have the right product, if you don't have your team passionately engaged, it is only a matter of time before somebody else passes you. And so the public story on Monster was that they got out innovated by LinkedIn and Indeed and people like that. The inside story that I wrote about for Forbes was they lost their sense of purpose. That was the root cause, and that's why they got out innovated.
And I mean, that can happen so quickly too. Is you
Oh,
lose
absolutely.
that, you just,
yeah,
the business shows that you've lost that as well.
it
So I think
does.
that ties into my next question. You talk about people being hardwired for meaning, that we want our lives to count for something, yet so many of us feel like our work is devoid of higher purpose. And we kind of look at it as going to work as an endless grind. How can we change that if we're in that situation or feeling like that right now?
Well, for a lot of people, if you don't own your own company, if you work for a boss, if every day just feels like Groundhog Day, this rinse and repeat, the first thing I'll tell you is that the story you tell yourself about why your work matters affects everything. So yeah, it'd be great if you work for some company that was telling you this great story about how the work matters, but you don't have to wait for that. The story you tell yourself affects everything that you do every single day. And so what I recommend for people is look for ways that you are already making a difference to, whether it be, if you can connect the dots to the ultimate customer, great. If you can't connect the dots to a coworker, you've got to identify how your work impacts others. And I've often said, if we had some spiritual lens on our life, some outside lens that we could look in, we would be stunned, absolutely stunned at the impact that we have on the people around us. We would take our lives so much more seriously, but we would take ourselves so much less seriously if we really understood that. Go watch, It's a Wonderful Life or Our Town, or it's a classic theme. But if you're feeling bored, if you're feeling like it is this slow drip, meaningless grind, I can tell you that accomplishment will only provide you with a short-term blip in happiness. You can try and work towards something, you can hit it, you can hit the number, you can hit the promotion, whatever it is. It will only be a short-term blip. The thing that will sustain you, that makes human beings at our best, is when we are in the service of others. So you have got to look for evidence that you are having a positive impact on others, or maybe you're having a negative impact and you need to change that. But when you look and you really understand how what you do and the way that you are affects other people, it is a complete game changer. On the one hand, there's more pressure on you because you realize your impact. But on the other hand, there's a little less pressure on you because you realize it's totally within your control.
That's true. And I think a lot of us really don't realize that the way that we're acting or the thoughts that we're having and the way that we just go out into our day and interact with everybody else, that really does have kind of a ripple effect that goes out there.
Ask anybody who has ever worked for someone who's depressed, been married to someone who is depressed, or raised by a depressed parent. And you could substitute in the word angry or critical or whatever negative words you want to substitute in for depressed. But if you've ever worked for someone, been raised by someone, or been married to someone, or even worked beside someone like that, people have a tremendous impact on each other, more than we realize.
That's so true. And I know one of the best examples that I have as a mom, I know that if I'm kind of having a crappy day and things just, I'm frustrated for whatever reason, my kids could have been having like the best day and then come home and they can feel that too. So then they get a little bit irritated and they kind of pick up on how I'm feeling, and it just kind of spreads throughout the house. It's the same way in your workplace as well.
It is. And there have been a lot of studies. One of the more famous ones was it takes 5 positive comments to outweigh 1 negative comment. So it takes 5 positives to outweigh 1 negative just to get you to neutral. The same thing happens with emotions. If you've got 5 positive people and 1, what I call the poison person in an office, the office will be neutral at best. More likely it'll go to the negative. That's an unfortunate human tendency, is when there's negative presence, we'll go to it. And that's why we have to be so proactive about putting a positive energy into things. And I don't mean you need to mask your feelings or not experience sadness or unhappiness if it's there. But on more days than not, you have a choice. And the way you ignite that positive feeling is you look for, how am I affecting this situation? And it is absolutely a game changer. And so one of the things we've done with a lot of companies is when we put this idea of purpose out there and everyone gets aligned around it, then that's something tangible, that everyone has the same language within a company. They all know what the company purpose is, the Nobel Purpose, as we call it. And then they can think, how do I impact that? So it gives you a really tangible thing to wake up and do every day. And that's what human beings want. Otherwise, it's just time to make the donuts.
That's true. I mean, just taking those few moments throughout the day to just kind of check in and see how you're feeling, to make sure that you're making the best positive decision that you can in the situation. And it all adds up. And eventually that, I believe that that's just going to be your natural state, that you're going to want to gravitate towards that more. And you're going to attract more people like that, that are going to be positive and want to do better during their day.
I mean, we in our company we have a clear Noble Purpose statement, and ours is we help leaders drive revenue and do work that makes them proud. And so everything we do is focused on helping people be proud of what they do and make money. Because we in business often create this false dichotomy. And so our job is to help companies eliminate that, because we know that it's really hard to be a good leader, to be a good corporate citizen and produce great products if you're not making money. So we know that the money part is really important. One of our clients is Kaiser Permanente, and they say, no money, no mission. So you got to make money. And so we really work on integrating those two things to where people don't feel like they have to make a choice between doing well and doing good. Those are the same.
And that's a great purpose to live by too, is knowing that you can have both of those and still contribute and be living your purpose. I want to talk a minute about your book, Forget Perfect. You talk about how trying to be perfect actually gets in the way of achieving your happiness. So what are some of the things that we can do to really let go of that need that some of us have to be perfect even before we start a project?
Well, one of the key things is you've got to erase, and this is especially true for women, you've got to erase some of these visual images in your head. Because I saw an old Oprah show and the woman was talking about the Kodak moment. Now you'd call it the Instagram moment, and so you've got to really let go of how you want things to look. And when I say look, I don't mean it's just the way you decorate or the way your body looks or the way your kids look. I mean, all that's wrapped up in it. But this ideal imagery, and instead of thinking about how it looks from the outside, focus more on how it feels from the inside. And that's a really important lens. And then back to, the key thing when I look back on Forget Perfect, I realized that what I was really trying to articulate there, and you say as a mom, the way that you speak as a parent and the things that you talk to your children about in terms of importance and the way that you live, I mean, you are shaping someone who's going to go out and have a ripple effect on hundreds upon hundreds of other people. And so, when I think about, everyone tends to have this image of perfect in their head, but I would say where it shows up the worst is in mothering. Because we women are so visual about what we want life to look like. We put so much pressure on ourselves as a mother. And so one of the things that I said in Forget Perfect was, it's not about lowering your standards. It's actually about raising them for the things that actually count.
And that's true. And that makes a lot of sense, because I know for
Yeah,
sure in my life, I've wasted a ton of time on things that, tomorrow it's not really going to
it
matter.
doesn't
So
matter.
you don't need to worry about it. Focus on the things that are going to make a difference in your life, like the next day or years down the road, or how your kids are going to grow up and treat people, and really focus on
Right.
those things that matter.
So I'm going to have to jump off because I just looked at my computer and I don't have my power cord, and I think I'm going to have to lose power, and I don't want to have an undignified ending where the whole screen goes black.
No worries. And I think that's a great way to end off on, that we're doing this live interview and it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to roll with it. So if we can do this, you guys can do that too. I
Excellent.
appreciate you taking the time to be here with us
It
and,
was so great.
share those insights. I want to encourage the audience to go to your website at nobelpurpose.com and follow you on Twitter at Lisa Earle McLeod. We are going to have everything that you guys need to find Lisa and her social media links, website links, on the email that you guys got today. So please, go check your email that you got with this video and enjoy Lisa's resources that she has. Again, she's been an amazing host to have on the show today, and I hope you guys have gained lots of insight from her. Even Lisa's gone now because her computer did die. So I just hope that gives you guys a sense of, what? Life doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to know your purpose and just go out there and roll with it. And it's okay. It'll all be okay. So again, you guys, appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, and see you tomorrow with the next interview.